All right, I'd like to call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. I was going to say tonight we're not going to have a meeting, but that's probably not a good April Fool's joke because probably nobody really wants us to have a meeting, so we won't do that. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Fennell?
Here.
Mr. Frazier?
Here.
Ms. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Labutus?
Here.
Mr. Lang?
Here.
Mr. Marmee?
Present.
Mr. Rath?
Here.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Bub?
Here.
And Mr. Cost?
Here.
We have all here this evening. Please join us for the invocation and followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Labutus.
Shall we pray? Heavenly Father, as we come to you in prayer this evening, we thank you for the beautiful day that you've given us and the beginning of spring as it is beginning to show. And we're past winter, hopefully. I ask you to be with us this evening in all of our conversations and our discussions. I would ask that we would keep your will for this city in mind as we make those decisions and bless our time together. These things I ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Labutus. Might be spring, but it's a little chilly in here. Okay. Next, we have caucus. That's a chance for council to discuss anything pertaining to the agenda tonight. Do we have anything?
Mr. Frazier. So we're going to bring back the resolution 1907 during miscellaneous comments. It is on the second reading, so we just wanted to make everybody aware that that is moved forward. There is an amendment and a map in your packet in order to align with the administration and what the council discussions have been going on in the Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Anything else for caucus this evening? Okay. We have a motion to approve our minutes of the March 18th meeting. Motion by Mr. Labutus.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. We have two appointments this evening from Mayor Hall. Appointing Lillian Flowers to the Etna Corporate Park Joint Economic Development Zone 1 and Zone 2 as an alternate. The Zone 1 will expire September 30th, and the Zone 2019. The Zone 2 will expire October 19th, 2020. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. Also, our other appointment by Mayor Hall, Chris Harkness to the Etna Corporate Park Joint Economic Development Zone 1 and Zone 2. His term would begin immediately to fill the term of a past member. The Zone 1 would expire on September 30th, 2019, and Zone 2, October 19th, 2020. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. That passes. Those both pass. All four. We have three reports this evening from standing committees. We have one from Finance, one from Service, and one from Economic Development. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Also under reports from city officials this evening, we have two, one from our auditor, Stephen Johnson. He was notified by Standard & Poor's that the city's bond rating was increased from an A+ to a AA. I think that must be a good thing. And one from our city tax administrator, Barb Jobe, the income tax revenue report ending March 15, 2019. Oh, I'm sorry, one more. One from Judge Higgins. The report is in your packet or in your mailbox from Judge Higgins, the Licking County Municipal Court 2018 Annual Court Report. Without objection, those three will be received and filed. Next on the agenda this evening, we have comments from citizens. There are two spots for comments from citizens. One is now and one is after the legislation. This is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. Do we have anyone who would like to speak in this first section of citizens' comments? Okay, moving on. We'll go to resolutions on the second reading, 19-16.
Resolution 19-16 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit applications to the Department of Homeland Security for fiscal year 2019 Fire Act grant programs in support of training programs, equipment purchases, funding for personnel, fire prevention, and fire safety programs throughout the city.
You've heard the second reading of 19-16. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee?
Make a motion to adopt Resolution 19-16.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 19-16? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes. 19-16 passes 10-0. Next on the first reading, we go to 19-18.
Resolution 19-18 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service of the City of Newark, Ohio to advertise for bids and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for providing the necessary labor, materials, and equipment for painting the water storage tank in the Stonewall Estates area.
19-18 will be held for 2 weeks for a second reading. Next we go to 19-19.
Resolution 19-19 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
19-19.
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
Make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on Resolution 19-19.
Motion to waive the 2-day reading rule by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. We need to expedite this. We have some things that just need to be paid immediately, and one of which we need vehicles, so we need to expedite this.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Autumn, please call the roll to waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
yes,
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes. 2-day reading rule has been waived, Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to adopt Resolution 19-19.
Motion by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any other discussion on 19-19? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
yes,
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. 19-19 passes 10-0. Next on the first reading, we have 19-20.
Resolution 19-20 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to apply for funding from the United States Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance under the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Program.
19-20 will be held for 2 weeks to our next reading. Next we have 19-21.
Resolution 19-21 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for various construction projects.
19-21 will be held for 2 weeks to our next meeting. Next, on the first reading, we have 19-22.
Resolution 19-22 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and enter into contract for certain essential supplies for various departments of the City of Newark, Ohio for 2019 and 2020 and declaring an emergency.
19-22 is on its first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmee?
make a motion to adopt Resolution 19-22.
Motion by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 19-22? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
yes,
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Yes. 19-22 passes 10-0. Next on the first reading, we have 19-23.
Resolution 19-23 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit applications to the Ohio Department of Transportation for the 2019 Transportation Alternatives Program to partially fund one future project.
19-23 will be held for 2 weeks to our next meeting. And finally, we have 19-24.
Resolution 19-24 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
And 19-24 will be held for 2 weeks to our next meeting. And that concludes the legislation this evening. Next on the agenda, we have your second opportunity for comments from citizens. Again, the same rules apply. This is not a debate of the council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll call you up. Do we have anyone tonight? Pretty quiet crowd. Okay, do we have anyone for the administration this evening? Law Director Sassen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Thank you, Director Sassen. Mayor Hall.
Yeah, two congratulations going out. One to our Newark Generals ice hockey team that won the state championship. We are, as we have them in here at times, we're working on that for a future council meeting. and probably just as strong, if not stronger, Garrett Ford, one of the 4 Special Olympians that was in here in November, well, I think it was October. He went to Dubai and won 4 golds at the World Special Olympic Games, which is quite phenomenal, to be honest with you. We had him in here, and I was very proud of the 4 that won gold medals out in Seattle at the National, and he went to Dubai and handled it pretty easy. I think he only competed in 4 events and won the gold in all 4. So we will be getting him in here too. So with that, I'd like to give congratulations to both those. Thank you very much.
That's great. That's pretty impressive.
Yep.
Mr. Fennell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to recognize my guest here and thank my mom for not playing any April Fool's jokes. With that, I will.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Mr. Frazier?
Mr. President, so to start this, I would like to ask the ball director just for the process to make sure I don't mess up anything with bringing back Resolution 1907. So the first step is to reconsider via a motion to bring it back to council. Is that the first motion that has to occur?
Your motion was to return it to committee,
Yes.
which is akin to a motion to table. So I don't think technically you need a procedural motion to bring it back up for consideration, but it's probably cleaner for the record that you ask that it be brought back for consideration after its second reading.
Yep, and then it's a motion to adopt and then a motion to amend.
The motion to adopt and motion to amend, I believe, is already pending.
Okay.
I believe it was made before you made your motion to return to committee.
See, economic motion, 10-0 to send to the Economic Development Committee.
The only motion was to send it back to you.
And there will need to be a motion to adopt.
Okay.
I think that's all we have.
Okay.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to reconsider Resolution 1907.
Second?
Second by Mr. Lang.
Yep.
Motion by Mr. Frazier, second by Mr. Lang. Is there any discussion on 19-07? Bringing it off the table, I guess. Seeing none on, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Murmy?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
And Mr. Cost?
Mr. Frazier, 1907 is ready to go.
All right, I'm going to make a motion to adopt 1907.
Motion by Mr. Frazier to adopt 19-07.
Second.
Second by Mr. Labutus. Is there any discussion on 19-07?
It's already had a motion to adopt.
I don't think it is.
not.
I think the motion was just off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just
Go
have
to the
to
economic.
amend and, yeah, so I thought.
Is there any discussion on 19-07? I'd like to make a motion to amend 19-07.
Do we need to make the first roll and then amend?
If it gets adopted, it gets adopted.
Okay, well, I'm going to, so we have the first and second, right? So let me talk about this. I just wanted to get to a forum where I could speak through it. So we spent a lot of economic development sessions. We had 3 meetings to talk about this. And we had recommendations from the administration, from fellow council members to include the area that we see before us. So what you see along the south fork of the Licking River is a conservation district zoning throughout the entire southern border of that. And so because of the conservation district, that was kind of where we drew the line the first time, where you see the green portion that is not changing. So because of the conservation district designation, as well as nonprofits and churches that are there that don't pay taxes on property, it was kind of the cleanest line in order to draw on the southern border. The other portion is to the north. That border has gone unchanged since the first reading, and so this was kind of the area that was initially targeted as well, where there's a high amount of population, high-density residential areas that's traditionally had discouraged. We also include the southern portions as well, and so the only conservation districts that are being included in this proposal is the baseball parks by the Ohio Street as well as White's Field, but that's because of geographic necessity, not because of economic development. That's just where the river meets, as well as that's along West Church Street where there's properties on the north of White's Field to be incorporated in that as well. The hobby shop is a perfect example of that, where that has been up for sale, not a lot of interest there, and there is a lot of potential to add tax credits there to provide the improvement. And so I kind of want to leave it open for discussion to get other council members' feedback if there's any questions or concerns on this line, but we did try to do a very diligent effort to encompass everybody's requests, including the expansions to the west as well as the south, to make sure that we try to be as collectively in tune with what the needs of the CRA is and the needs of our community.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Anyone else on 19-07?
Mr. President?
Mr. Lang?
Yeah, I would like to hear from Director Motter as to how he feels about the new border. I know this was kind of your conception from the beginning. If you would, it'd be good to hear your thoughts on the new map. And
Mr. Motter?
In discussion with Councilman Frazier, Councilman Blake, and the mayor, I think we're all pretty well satisfied with the way the borders are drawn right now. Yeah, I relayed that on to Councilman Frazier via an email the other day that the mayor and I were in agreement with that southern border being along the South Fork of the Licking River and not doing that extension or that appendage following State Route 13 down to the Newark Heath Corporation line. So I think we're in good. I think we're ready to go.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Motter. Anyone else? Sensing? Yes, Mr. Frazier.
I would like to make a motion to amend to the amendment that's in the packet labeled as 1907A.
I'll second.
Motion to amend by Mr. Frazier, second by Mr. Lang. Mr. Frazier, is there any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion on this amendment?
Mr. President,
Mr. Blake?
just want to offer my thanks to the chairman for his work on this and working with Director Motter. I think this is going to be a huge benefit for the residents that live in this area, and so just want to thank you for your leadership and thank you, Director Motter, for all your help. So it's been very productive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Anyone else? Autumn, please call the roll to vote on the amendment for 19-07A.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
19-07 has been amended to 19-07A. Any discussion on 19-07A?
Do I need to make a motion to adopt?
We're good.
Okay.
Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes. 19-07A as amended has passed. Mr. Frazier.
I just would like to thank the committee for taking the time with me to work on this, and your support and your unanimous support goes a long way. Also, I want to thank the people that are here for the Newark homelessness issue for showing up again this week. I did get to attend a meeting at Vertical 196 as well as the Newark NAS outreach, and it is very humbling to see the amount of effort that people are putting in and to care for their neighbors. And so I hope that we continue to make headway with the nonprofits in our community to help care for those that are in need, as well as better coordinate the resources at hand in order to better serve others. And with that, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Hall?
I'll pass, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Labutus?
Mr. President, I just want to take a second to thank Mr. Motter and Mr. Frazier and Mr. Blake on your work with 1907A, all the work you put together on that, but that will be able to pass this evening. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Mr. Labutus. Mr. Lang?
Nothing for me tonight, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Mr. Lang, Mr. Marmee?
I need to call a finance committee meeting for April the 15th. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Mr. Rath?
Thank you. I'll call the service committee meeting for the 15th, and I suppose this is as good a time as any to announce my engagement to Mrs. Fennell. It's time to tell everybody that, no, April Fools. April Fools. Just kidding.
Can you say father-in-law?
Why is your face so red?
You got her name wrong.
I think Sean's mom just passed out, I'll tell you.
I think I should pass.
Probably a good choice. Thank you, Mr. Rath. Mr. Blake?
I'll pass, Mr. President.
You don't want to top that?
No, I do not.
Mr. Bubb?
I'll pass, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bubb and Mr. Cost. I will. Thank you, Mr. Cost. Well, How about that? Our next committee is April 15th, as Mr. Marmy said, starting at 5:45. Our next full council will be that same evening, starting at 7. Motion adjourned. Motion by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Lewis. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Same sign.